Hello out in YouTube land. It's your old buddy Lee, and I do mean old. I wanted to continue on about the genealogy a little bit. I covered some of the family search information and explained how the records on family search, once you get past a couple 100 years old, it's kind of subjective to whether it's really accurate or not. You just kind of got to take it with a grain of salt. Check how many sources you have is a good indication of how solid your records are. If you look up a person's name and there's only a couple of records that verify their existence or their identity, it's not real solid. Some people have 20 sources that prove that they were a living person, so that's pretty solid. Anyway, I'll do some more about family search in the future, but I did want to touch on WikiTree. It's another free service. All you got to do is start an account. There's no tricks or small print to worry about. They're legit. I believe that they come out of the United Kingdom. I'm not sure which country. I think it's England, but you can check if you're that interested to know. They have a real good setup. Their genealogical resources aren't as big and broad as family search, but I believe that WikiTree makes more of an effort to deal in reality, meaning that the records that they use in WikiTree are probably more trustworthy than the ones in family search. I've got my family tree on both family search and WikiTree, and it doesn't go as back. My family tree doesn't go back as far on WikiTree because they don't accept some of the same people. They're just not convinced that these people really are that solid to base a genealogy on. The one really coolest thing about WikiTree is that they have separate groups built up inside of the organization, and that there's people that are experts in genealogy that you can contact and send emails back and forth with. And these people are like going to see the doctor for free. They really know their stuff. I've corresponded with some that had written books on genealogy and had been studying history for decades. Some of them were professors and had master's degrees in history and that. And they're all there for you to pick their brains, and it doesn't cost you a penny. I don't know how anybody in their right mind that's interested in genealogy wouldn't sign up for WikiTree because of the benefits of having experts there at the other end of the line when you send them an email. One lady helped me so much on Swedish genealogy, it was unbelievable. She had written a couple of books, and she was a doctor, and she knew her stuff. I mean, it was just unbelievable. I thought that I had committed a lot to researching my family tree until I met her, and she just lived it and breathed it. So that was one of the major benefits of WikiTree, was there's experts there that can help you. Send them an email. If you're interested in Scandinavian genealogy like I am, they have specific groups that you can join, and it's just not one or two experts, it's a whole team of people that know their stuff. So you can go there and be confident that when you ask a question, you're going to get a real good and accurate answer. One of the other things I like about WikiTree in particular is that they have special applications within their setup, their program, that you can see if you're a descendant of the Mayflower. I checked, and I do have 2 ancestors that were on the Mayflower. One of them was the little girl who was the first one to jump off the boat and step onto Plymouth Rock. I can't recall her name right off the top of my head, but she is my ancestor. Then there's another fella on the ship that was also one of my ancestors. I'll tell you, when you got really deeply involved in the genealogy, you're not going to remember every ancestor that you ever read about or look up. You're going to have to go back and check, and then you go, oh wow, man, there's the name. Why didn't I remember the name? But when you got literally thousands of names and dates, you're not going to remember your 17th great-grandmother's maiden name and the day she was born. We aren't computers, we're human beings. So you can't expect us to perform like, you can't expect people to perform like a machine. That's why they make machines. You know, they're superior to human beings in some ways. Anyway, the Mayflower is one list that you can see if you've got a descendant on that came over on the Mayflower. But there's also other categories. Famous musicians, artists. You can see if you're related to one of the presidents. I'm actually checked on there, and I'm actually related to several different presidents. I'm even related to Barack Obama, because Barack Obama's mother is of Irish descent. And you go back a few generations, and we have a common ancestor in Ireland. I'd have to double check and write down the connection. He's like my 8th cousin 3 times removed, or whatever. It's a pretty flimsy relationship, but it is a connection nonetheless. I'm related to Abraham Lincoln. I'm related to George Washington, John Adams. A lot of the early English descended presidents I'm related to. It's kind of entertaining to see your connections if you're related to some of them. I checked, and I'm not related to Trump. I'm not related to Bush, but I am related to a few of the other ones, Calvin Coolidge and Roosevelt. It's kind of amusing to look at it, just because you have a rich and powerful connection to somebody that's famous doesn't get you a discount on coffee at McDonald's or anything like that. Another one of the categories that you can check and see is if one of your ancestors rode with William the Conqueror when he conquered England in 1066. And that one's pretty interesting, because if you find one of your ancestors that rode with William the Conqueror, often that'll lead to more family trees to search in Europe, because William the Conqueror was from Normandy, and a lot of the men that rode with him were of French descent. I'd say 99% of the men that rode with him have French family trees. So if you find a connection to one of those fellas, you'll probably have a vast amount of information that spreads through medieval Europe prior to 1066. I've probably got 6 or 7 people that were my ancestors that rode with William the Conqueror, including William the Conqueror. And that's pretty fun to think about, play with it with your imagination. If you ever seen an old Errol Flynn or Tyrone Power movie back in those days when there were knights and ladies and castles and all that stuff, it's kind of fun to imagine that you actually had an ancestor that lived back then. he might have been a knight. You know, obviously he was a knight because he was with William the Conqueror, but if you go back to his father or his grandfather, you may have even had a descendant that was a king of some little country back there in Europe. Back in those days, even France was split up into a dozen different small kingdoms. It's really interesting because genealogy is more than just learning about your particular family member, but you learn about the world and how it was put together back 1,000 years ago. All those little countries. It was a long time before France became one large country, and the more you learn about history, the more you learn that the same goes for all the rest of those countries too. Germany didn't really become a country until less than 200 years ago. Before, it was a bunch of small little kingdoms. Some were bigger than others, and that's true, but by and large, it was just almost like a little confederation of states. It's too cumbersome to remember it all, so if you're interested in how many little states made up ancient Germany, you'll have to go and look it up. Anyway, there's other categories. The men who signed the Magna Carta with King John. That's also one that you can check and see if one of your ancestors may have been there and actually signed his name to the Magna Carta. That's pretty interesting too. It's like time travel. You can go back and actually imagine what it was like to see your great-great-great-great-granddaddy standing in line at some field in England, stepping up and taking the quill, dipping it in the ink and signing his name to the document. You know, that one of your ancestors was there making history. And it kind of gives you a feeling of belonging to it, that you were, in your own way, you were a part of something big and important in its day. And you actually were within a few steps of King John. And here he was under pressure to sign this document and hand over basic legal and human rights to the people. That's what the Magna Carta was about, was extending rights to the working class and the people that made up the majority. So you could say that you were actually part of the history of humanity and the progress of humanity. Another group that's in there is to see if you have any ancestors that signed the Constitution or the Declaration of Independence. And I've got 7 different ancestors that signed the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. You know, there's nobody in your family that's going to be able to tell you if you have an ancestor like that. If you ask them, if you ask Grandma or Grandpa, they're going to say, I don't know. No one ever asked. No one ever cared. But if you do ask and you do care, you can go on a place like WikiTree and find out. And it does, like I say, it makes you feel like you're part of the chain. You belong because you are a part of history. You're a living part of history. And I think that it's important. Not everybody feels the same way. Some people don't really care about history, and that's their right. But I happen to be one that kind of embraces it and makes it a part of my life, really. So anyway, I just wanted to pop in long enough to tell you about WikiTree. You can just do a search for WikiTree, and it'll take you to a link where you can sign up for free. Check it out. You might have to invest a couple hours to feel your way around, but it'll be worth it. Alright, well thanks for stopping by. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.